My name is Alexandra Williams, and 8 months ago, my boss threw my project proposal in the garbage in front of my entire team and told me to stop fantasizing with unprofessional ideas that have no place in a serious company. She stood in front of the 12 engineers in my department, literally tore up the folder where I had poured 6 months of research and development, and announced that my proposal to revolutionize our artificial intelligence system was technically impossible and commercially unviable. What she didn't know was that 2 months later, she would see exactly my project presented by our direct competition at the most important tech conference of the year, generating contracts worth $500 million and forever changing the rules of our industry. Before I tell you exactly how her contempt became the catapult for the most satisfying revenge of my career, could you like this video and subscribe to the channel? Because what I'm about to reveal will show you how one arrogant decision can destroy not just a company, but the reputation of whoever made it in front of an entire industry worth $50 billion annually. And believe me, you need to hear every detail of how one person's arrogance triggered the most spectacular downfall I've witnessed in 12 years of my career. Let me take you to the real beginning of this story, because the best revenge always starts long before the revenge actually happens. 3 years ago, I joined TechFlow Industries as a senior AI development engineer. It was an American multinational specializing in artificial intelligence solutions for businesses, with offices in 18 countries and annual revenue of $3.2 billion. My job was to design advanced algorithms that improved the operational efficiency of our corporate clients. My direct boss, Christine Morrison, was Director of Technological Innovation. She had been with the company for 12 years, had risen from junior programmer to director, and had that particular arrogance of tech executives who believe their past experience makes them infallible experts in everything. She was one of those people who constantly interrupt technical meetings, who never admit they don't understand something, and who treat innovative ideas as personal threats to their authority. From my first day, Christine made it clear that she considered my hiring a wrong decision by human resources. "We don't need external developers telling us how to do our job," she told me during our first individual meeting. "You have startup experience, but we've been building real enterprise solutions for 12 years. I hope you understand your place on this team." But I hadn't gotten this far to settle for mediocrity. I had a master's degree in artificial intelligence from MIT, had developed 3 patented algorithms that were acquired by Google, and spoke 4 programming languages with native fluency. More importantly, I had identified something that no one else at TechFlow seemed to have noticed. They were losing massive market opportunities because their technology followed obsolete paradigms from 2018. During my first 8 months, I dedicated myself to exhaustively studying the limitations of our existing systems. I analyzed source codes, reviewed data architectures, studied client usage patterns, and identified 47 specific points where we could significantly improve the performance and functionality of our products. These weren't theoretical assumptions. They were optimizations based on rigorous analysis of 12,000 lines of code, performance tests in 23 different environments, and improvement projections that could increase the efficiency of our algorithms by 340%, while reducing computational resource consumption by 65%. Every time I tried to discuss these findings with Christine, she dismissed them without even reviewing them technically. "Our systems work perfectly," she would say, leafing through my reports with visible disinterest. "We've optimized these architectures for years. If there really were such significant improvements available, our senior engineers would have already identified them." But the data didn't lie. Our clients were reporting performance problems that could be easily solved, while smaller competitors were winning contracts with inferior technologies simply because they were more resource efficient. We were losing market share for being too comfortable with the technological status quo. For months, I continued developing my proposal in personal time. I worked nights and weekends, programmed functional prototypes, conducted proof-of-concept tests, analyzed competitor benchmarks. I built an 89-page development proposal that detailed every aspect of the new architecture, from algorithm optimizations to infrastructure implementation, from performance metrics to cost-saving projections. My proposal wasn't just a brilliant idea. It was a completely functional system that I had programmed, tested, and validated independently. I had developed prototypes that demonstrated 340% improvements in processing speed, 65% reductions in memory usage, and new capabilities that no competitor had available. It was the kind of innovation that normally requires teams of 20 engineers working for 2 years. The decisive moment came when TechFlow announced its annual internal hackathon, where each department could present innovative projects for executive consideration. It was the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the real potential of my new AI architecture. Christine initially didn't want to include my project in the final presentations. The hackathon is for collaborative projects that reflect the teamwork of our departments, she told me when I proposed presenting my research. Besides, individual projects of this technical complexity aren't appropriate for executive evaluations that require team consensus. But I had researched the hackathon's evaluation criteria. I knew that TechFlow's CEO, Robert Franklin, had built the company precisely through disruptive technological innovations. His business philosophy was based on identifying opportunities that other developers considered too risky or complex. If anyone could appreciate my proposal, it would be him. After 3 weeks of persistent pressure and several technical demos that impressed my fellow engineers, Christine finally agreed to give me 20 minutes in the final presentations. But keep it concise, she warned me. Executives don't have patience for technical demonstrations that don't show clear commercial results. I spent the next 2 weeks perfecting my presentation. I reduced 89 pages of technical documentation to 15 slides that told a compelling story, identified problem, analysis of current limitations, proposed solution, prototype demonstration, improvement projections, implementation plan, and projected commercial impact. Each slide was backed by live functional demos, but presented in a way that was understandable to executives without deep technical backgrounds. I also prepared a live demonstration of my prototype running in parallel with our current systems. I knew that some executives preferred seeing real results instead of theoretical projections, especially when evaluating investment proposals in technological development. The morning of the final presentations, I arrived at the lab 3 hours early to set up my demonstration environment, verify that all my prototypes were working correctly, and practice every technical transition. I had rehearsed every explanation, every demo, every answer to possible technical or commercial questions. The main auditorium was full when I entered. Robert Franklin had brought 4 executives from headquarters. Christine had invited directors from all technical departments, and there were representatives from our offices in London, Berlin, and São Paulo. 45 people in total, all waiting to see innovations that would determine TechFlow's development priorities for the next 3 years. The first 4 hours were presentations from other teams. Web development showed incremental optimizations in user interfaces. Security presented encryption protocol updates. Infrastructure talked about migration to cloud services. Solid presentations, but all focused on gradual improvements to existing functionalities. Finally, Christine introduced me. To close the technical presentations, Alexandra Williams from our AI team wants to show some experiments she's been developing on algorithm optimization. Her tone made it clear that she considered my presentation a technical appendix after the commercially viable proposals they had seen. I stood in front of the auditorium with confidence that came from months of rigorous development and exhaustive testing. I knew I had 20 minutes to change everyone's perception about TechFlow's technological future. Good morning, I began, looking directly at Robert Franklin. I want to show you how we can completely revolutionize our AI products, increase our performance by 340%, reduce our operational costs by $2.3 million annually, and gain competitive advantages that our rivals won't be able to replicate for at least 2 years. My first slide showed a direct performance comparison. Our current algorithms processing 10,000 queries in 47 seconds versus my new system processing the same queries in 13 seconds, with superior results in accuracy and lower resource consumption. I could see that I had Robert Franklin's complete attention. He had leaned forward, taking technical notes, asking specific questions while I explained each optimization. The following slides showed system architecture, implementation of advanced machine learning algorithms, and specific use cases that would solve current problems of our biggest clients. Our competitive advantage would be immediate, I explained, showing benchmarks against IBM, Microsoft, and Google systems. We don't just surpass our current competitors, but introduce capabilities that the industry considered theoretically impossible with commercially viable technology. I reached the live demonstration. I had programmed my system to solve a specific problem that our clients frequently reported: predictive analysis of large data volumes in real time. My algorithm processed 50,000 complex data records in 8 seconds and generated projections that our current system would have taken 34 minutes to complete. Robert Franklin interrupted the demonstration. "Alexandra, this is extraordinary. What resources would you need to implement this architecture in production?" "Mr. Franklin," I responded, "I've developed all the fundamental code base working independently. With a team of 6 engineers and 4 months of development, we could have the first commercial version ready for our main clients. The initial investment would be $1.2 million with projected return of $15 million in the first year." The energy in the auditorium had completely changed. Engineers who had been checking their laptops during other presentations were now taking screenshots of my demos, asking specific technical questions, discussing among themselves about implementation possibilities. I could see that my presentation had captured exactly the type of disruptive innovation that Robert Franklin was looking for to position TechFlow as a technological leader. I was on slide 13 of 15, explaining the deployment timeline, when Christine decided to intervene. "Alexandra," she interrupted me, with a voice loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear, "I think we've already dedicated enough time to this technical speculation. These prototypes always look impressive in controlled demonstrations, but the reality is that they're unstable, expensive, and risky for real enterprise implementation." She stood up from her seat and walked toward the presentation area, clearly preparing for some kind of demonstration of technical authority. "We've been developing robust and scalable AI systems for 12 years. We don't need to experiment with unproven architectures that could compromise the stability of our existing products." Robert Franklin seemed confused by the interruption. "Christine, it seems to me that Alexandra has developed significant innovations that deserve serious evaluation. These performance results are exactly what we need to maintain our competitive advantage." But Christine had already decided that my presentation was a direct threat to her authority as innovation director. "Robert, with all due respect, Alexandra has only been with the company for 11 months. She doesn't have the executive experience or knowledge of our legacy systems to understand why these optimizations wouldn't work in real production. We've evaluated similar improvements before, and they always end up being more complex and expensive than projected." I could feel that something terrible was about to happen. Christine had that expression I had seen before when she felt technically challenged and needed to reaffirm her dominance over her team. "In fact," she continued, walking toward the table where I had my technical documentation and prototypes, "I think these presentations reflect exactly the type of unrealistic thinking that can lead us to make costly decisions based on individual research without team validation." She took my documentation folder, 89 pages of technical analysis, system architectures, performance tests, commented source code, and lifted it in front of the entire auditorium. "This," she said, waving my documentation as if it were evidence of professional incompetence, "is exactly what happens when we allow individual developers to confuse personal experiments with viable enterprise solutions." And then she did something I never expected she would do in a professional environment. She opened my folder and began throwing the pages to the floor, one by one, while continuing her tirade. "Don't waste my time with unprofessional ideas," she said, throwing more pages of my research. "These proposals are technical fantasies that have no place in serious executive evaluations." The entire auditorium fell into complete silence. 45 technology professionals watching while my boss literally threw 8 months of research and development to the floor. I could see expressions of shock, disbelief, and secondhand embarrassment on the faces of engineers who clearly had never witnessed such unprofessional behavior in a corporate environment. Robert Franklin stood up immediately. Christine, this is completely inappropriate. Alexandra was presenting serious research that deserves professional evaluation, not this type of behavior. But Christine had completely lost control of the situation. She stepped on some of my pages and looked at me directly with contempt. If you want to really contribute to this team, you need to learn that pretty ideas don't replace real experience. Focus on gradually improving what we already have instead of chasing fantasies that could cost this company millions. The humiliation was absolute. My colleagues looked at me with a mixture of compassion and horror. Robert Franklin seemed furious about Christine's behavior, and she looked satisfied with her demonstration of directorial authority. I felt my face turning red, my hands beginning to tremble, tears of rage accumulating in my eyes. "Pick up your garbage," Christine told me, pointing to the pages scattered across the auditorium floor. "And next time, make sure your ideas are at the professional level of this company before making us waste time with amateur experiments." I bent down to pick up my documentation while 45 professionals watched me. Source code pages mixed with performance analysis, system architectures trampled, crumpled proof of concept tests. 8 months of innovative work treated as literal garbage in front of the entire company's technical management. When I finished picking up the pages, I left the auditorium without saying a word. I walked straight to my office, closed the door, and sat at my desk trying to process the most brutal humiliation of my 12 years in technology. But that humiliation would become the motivation for the most systematic and devastating revenge I could ever have imagined. 3 days after the presentation, while still processing what had happened, I received a LinkedIn message from someone who had been in the auditorium. "Alexandra, I'm Michael Torres, senior engineer at TechFlow. What I saw on Tuesday was shameful, but I also saw the real potential of your work. I have contacts in the industry who would be very interested in what you developed. Could we talk?" That conversation changed everything. Michael connected me with 3 former TechFlow employees who had left the company precisely because of Christine's toxic attitude toward innovation. One of them, Carlos Rodriguez, had founded an AI startup called NeuralEdge and was looking for exactly the type of technology I had developed. "Alexandra," Carlos told me during our first video call, "I've seen your demonstration." Michael sent me the video he discreetly recorded. "What you developed isn't just impressive, it's revolutionary. We're prepared to offer you a CTO position with 15% equity, $180,000 salary, and complete autonomy to develop your technology." But there was something more. "We also have investors interested in financing the complete development of your system. We're talking about $8 million in initial funding if you can demonstrate that your technology really surpasses current market systems." The irony was perfect. The same technology that Christine had called unprofessional was now considered valuable enough to attract $8 million in venture capital investment. "Carlos," I said, "I accept the offer. But I have one condition. I want to maintain complete confidentiality about the origin of this technology until it's ready for commercial launch." "Of course," he responded. "We completely understand the situation. In fact, we prefer that you keep a low profile until we have something ready to show the market." During the next 6 months, I worked secretly with NeuralEdge developing and perfecting my AI system. Every night, after fulfilling my schedules at TechFlow, I worked until 3 a.m. optimizing algorithms, improving performance, and preparing the technology for commercial launch. Meanwhile, at TechFlow, I watched how Christine desperately tried to develop innovations that would justify her position as innovation director. Apparently, Robert Franklin had asked specific questions about why we were losing market share to smaller competitors, and Christine needed results she couldn't generate. I saw her working nights and weekends, hiring external consultants, trying to replicate optimizations she had seen in my presentation. But there was a fundamental problem. She didn't have the deep technical understanding or programming capability necessary to actually develop the solutions the company needed. 6 months after my public humiliation, NeuralEdge was ready for launch. We had developed not only my original system, but 3 complete commercial products based on my architecture. Beta tests with clients had generated results that exceeded all our original projections. The moment of revenge came during Tech Summit Chicago. the most important technology conference in America, where major AI companies present their annual innovations. TechFlow would have a main booth where Christine would present the company's latest innovations. What she didn't know was that Neural Edge would also be presenting at the same conference, in the booth right next to theirs. The morning of the conference, I arrived early to supervise the installation of our demonstration. We had prepared a presentation that would show the real capabilities of my technology: real-time processing of massive data volumes, predictive analysis with 97% accuracy, and performance optimizations that surpassed everything commercially available. At 10 a.m., the conference officially began. Christine was at TechFlow's booth showing the same incremental optimizations they had been developing for months: 15% improvements in speed, 8% reductions in resource usage, functionalities that were basically updates to existing systems. Meanwhile, at Neural Edge's booth, our demonstration was attracting crowds. Engineers from IBM, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon approached to see algorithms that processed data 340% faster than anything commercially available. Fortune 500 executives asked questions about commercial availability and licensing prices. The first person from TechFlow who recognized my technology was Robert Franklin. I saw him approach Neural Edge's booth around noon, initially just as part of his general tour of the conference. But when he saw our demonstration in action, his expression completely changed. "This is extraordinary," he told Carlos. "Who developed this architecture?" Carlos looked at me and smiled. "Robert, I want to introduce you to our CTO, Alexandra Williams. I believe you already know each other." Robert's expression when he recognized me was unforgettable. Surprise, confusion, gradual understanding, and finally something that seemed like respect mixed with regret. "Alexandra," he said, clearly processing the implications of what he was seeing. "Is this the technology you presented at our hackathon?" "A much more advanced version," I replied. "I've had 6 months to perfect it without interruptions or interference. As you can see, the results speak for themselves." "Could we talk privately?" he asked me. We walked to a quieter area of the conference, away from the crowds and demonstrations. Robert looked genuinely affected by what he had discovered. "Alexandra, what happened in that presentation was completely inappropriate. Christine acted unprofessionally, and I should have intervened more decisively." "Robert," I replied, "I don't need apologies. I need you to understand what TechFlow really lost that day." I explained how my technology not only surpassed everything TechFlow had developed, but we had already signed preliminary contracts worth $23 million with companies that were previously TechFlow clients. IBM had licensed our technology for global implementation. Microsoft was evaluating acquiring Neural Edge completely. "In 6 months," I continued, "we've achieved what TechFlow hasn't accomplished in 3 years of development. And all because your innovation director decided that my work was too unprofessional to be seriously considered." Robert remained silent for several minutes, processing the financial and competitive implications of what I was telling him. "Would there be any possibility of you returning to TechFlow?" he finally asked. "We could offer you the direction of the entire department, total autonomy, unlimited budget for development." "Robert," I said, "in 2 weeks, Google is going to announce that it's acquiring Neural Edge for $47 million. My 15% participation will make me a millionaire. Why would I return to work for someone who considered my work unprofessional garbage?" That afternoon, the news spread throughout the conference. Attendees began comparing TechFlow's demonstrations with Neural Edge's. The difference was so obvious that several specialized media began writing articles about how a 6-month startup had completely surpassed an established multinational. Christine finally approached Neural Edge's booth around 5 p.m. I saw her observe our demonstration from a distance, clearly recognizing the technology she had publicly rejected. When she finally saw me, her expression changed from confusion to something like horror. She approached slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Alexandra," she said, with a barely audible voice, "is this the technology from your presentation?" "An evolved version," I replied. "It turns out it was professional after all." "I don't understand," she said. looking around the booth where executives from the world's largest companies were making offers for our technology. "How did you get resources to develop this?" "Christine," I said, looking directly at her. "When you have a really innovative idea, there are always people who can recognize its value. The difference is working with people who see opportunities instead of threats." The expression on her face when she realized she had lost the biggest opportunity of her career was something I'll never forget. A week after the conference, TechFlow announced that Christine Morrison had decided to explore new professional opportunities. Robert Franklin tried to contact me several times to discuss possible collaborations or acquisitions, but it was already too late. The acquisition of NeuralEdge by Google was completed exactly 2 weeks after the conference. My 15% participation became $7.05 million, and Google offered me to continue as director of AI development with an annual salary of $450,000 plus additional equity in future projects. But the most satisfying revenge came 6 months later, when I was invited to be the keynote speaker at Tech Summit San Francisco, presenting on disruptive innovation in artificial intelligence. Exactly the type of presentation that Christine had considered unprofessional. During my 45-minute presentation in front of 3,000 technology professionals, I told the whole story. I explained how an idea that was rejected and publicly humiliated had become a $47 million acquisition. I showed how executive arrogance can cost not just opportunities, but a company's entire future. When I finished, I received a standing ovation that lasted 4 minutes. But the most satisfying thing was seeing Robert Franklin in the front row, taking notes furiously, clearly calculating how much Christine's arrogance had cost TechFlow. His expression was a mixture of professional admiration and business regret that was worth more than any apology. "Innovation has no ego," I said to close my presentation, "but the executives who block it do. And when ego gets between a good idea and its implementation, the market always finds another way to make it reality." After the conference, something unexpected happened. A TechCrunch reporter approached me for an exclusive interview. "Alexandra, your story is going viral on LinkedIn. More than 200,000 professionals have shared clips of your presentation. Could you elaborate on the specific lessons for tech executives?" That interview was published 3 days later with the title, "The Engineer Who Turned Public Humiliation into $47 million Tech Leadership Lessons." The article generated over 2 million views in 48 hours and was translated into 12 languages. But the real consequences were just beginning. A week after the article, I received a call I never expected. It was from the Secretary of Digital Innovation. "Ms. Williams, we've been following your story and want to invite you to lead a new national artificial intelligence initiative. We're establishing an advisory council for American tech companies, and we need someone who understands both innovation and the organizational obstacles that block it." The position included directly advising the government on innovation policies, with an annual budget of $50 million to invest in promising tech startups. It was the type of influence that would allow me to ensure that no other innovator went through what I had experienced. "I accept," I replied. "But with one condition. I want to establish a specific program to identify and support developers whose ideas are being blocked by obsolete corporate structures." 6 months later, the Alexandra program, as the press began calling it, had identified and funded 23 technology projects that had been rejected by established companies. 3 of those projects had already received acquisition offers for more than $10 million each. Meanwhile, TechFlow continued struggling. Without Christine as innovation director, they had tried hiring several external executives, but none could generate the innovations necessary to recover their competitive position. Their market value had fallen 40% in 8 months, and several of their main clients had migrated to solutions based on my original technology. Robert Franklin made one last attempt to contact me. This time, it wasn't to offer me a job, but for a personal conversation. We met at a discreet cafe in downtown San Francisco. He looked genuinely affected, thinner, with dark circles that suggested sleepless nights. "Alexandra," he began, "I'm not here as CEO of TechFlow. I'm here as someone who made a leadership mistake that destroyed not just an opportunity, but probably my company. Robert, I replied, I don't need you to apologize to me. I need you to learn from what happened. I have learned, he said, with a sincerity I hadn't seen before. I've completely restructured how we evaluate internal ideas. I've implemented specific policies against the type of behavior Christine showed. I've hired an organizational culture consultant to ensure that no employee is ever again humiliated for presenting innovations. He paused, clearly struggling with something deeper. But it's too late for TechFlow, isn't it? I showed him my tablet with the latest industry news. 6 companies that had been TechFlow clients for years were now using technology based on my original algorithms, implemented through different startups I had advised. The ecosystem I had created around my original work now processed more data daily than all of TechFlow's infrastructure. Robert, I said, TechFlow can still survive, but it will never lead. The moment of technological leadership was lost when Christine trampled my documentation. You can't recover lost innovation opportunities. You can only create new ones. Is there anything I can do? He asked. Yes, I replied. Use your experience to ensure that other CEOs don't make the same mistake. Speak publicly about what you learned. Turn your failure into a lesson for the entire industry. That conversation resulted in something I never would have predicted. Robert Franklin became one of the most vocal advocates for organizational cultures that support internal innovation. He began giving conferences on leadership that doesn't block innovation, using TechFlow's story as a case study. His first public presentation on the topic generated so much impact that Harvard Business School included it in their executive leadership curriculum. The case study was titled, TechFlow, When Executive Ego Destroys Competitive Advantage. 1 year after my original humiliation, I was invited to co-present with Robert at MIT. In front of 500 MBA students, we told our story from both perspectives, the blocked innovator and the CEO who learned too late. The most important lesson, Robert said during that presentation, isn't that executives should be more humble. It's that they should create organizational systems that evaluate ideas based on technical merit, not internal politics or personal ego. And the lesson for innovators, I added, is that when an organization rejects your best work, the market always has room for good ideas. You just need to find the right people who can recognize real value. After that MIT presentation, something extraordinary happened. A doctoral student approached with tears in her eyes. Professor Williams, she said, my advisor rejected my doctoral thesis last month, calling it too ambitious and impractical. After hearing your story, I think I need to find a new advisor instead of abandoning my research. I helped her connect with professors at other universities who valued risky research. Her doctoral thesis, completed 18 months later, resulted in 3 patents and a startup that was acquired by Tesla for $23 million. That interaction made me realize that my revenge had evolved into something more important, a movement to protect and nurture innovation that's being blocked by short-sighted authorities. 2 years after my humiliation at TechFlow, I launched the Foundation for Blocked Innovation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to identifying, financing, and protecting innovators whose ideas are being suppressed by dysfunctional organizational structures. The foundation has supported more than 100 projects in 15 countries, with a success rate of 67%, defined as projects that generate verifiable commercial or social value within 2 years. The total value of the innovations we've supported exceeds $800 million. Christine Morrison never found another executive position in technology. According to LinkedIn, she worked briefly as an independent consultant before completely changing industries. The last time I looked for information about her, she was working in project management for a construction company in Phoenix. TechFlow was acquired by a German multinational 18 months after my departure, mainly for their existing contracts and legacy infrastructure. Robert Franklin received compensation that allowed him to establish his own tech leadership consultancy. Ironically, he uses my story as his main case study to explain how impulsive executive decisions can destroy decades of business building. As for me, after completing my 3-year period as advisor to the Secretary of Digital Innovation, Google offered me to lead their new ethical artificial intelligence division in America. It's a position that allows me to ensure that the technology I helped create is used responsibly, while continuing to identify and support the next generation of innovators. 6 months ago, I received an invitation to give the opening speech at Tech Summit San Francisco 2027. Exactly the same event where I first presented the most satisfying revenge of my career. The assigned topic: how to turn rejection into technological revolution. While preparing that presentation, I reflected on everything that had changed. My public humiliation had become a career that directly impacts the lives of hundreds of innovators. Christine's arrogance had triggered a movement that now protects brilliant ideas from being destroyed by fragile egos. The most powerful revenge wasn't proving that Christine was wrong about my technology. It was using her mistake to create a system that ensures no other innovator has to go through what I experienced. During my 2027 opening speech, in front of 5,000 technology professionals, I ended with these words: "True revenge against ignorance isn't proving you were right once. It's creating systems that protect everyone who will come after you." Christine Morrison did me a favor she never intended. She taught me that the best ideas don't need authorization from people who can't understand them. They just need to reach the right hands. If your boss ever throws your work in the trash and tells you it's not professional enough, remember my story, and then go build something so extraordinary that the entire industry has to recognize its value. The ovation lasted 7 minutes. And this time, I could see exactly what I had built. An auditorium full of innovators who knew their ideas had value, regardless of who tried to convince them otherwise. That's real revenge. Not just succeeding despite rejection, but ensuring that short-sighted rejection never again destroys the next great idea. In the end, Christine didn't just lose a $47 million opportunity. She lost the chance to be part of something that would change how an entire industry treats innovation. And that, believe me, is a lesson that was worth every moment of humiliation she put me through.